Sarah Chen's hand froze halfway to her wine glass as her mother's email loaded on her phone. Subject line: urgent. Do not attend tonight. She scrolled down, her stomach tightening with each word. Amanda Richardson is co-hosting the Legal Excellence Gala. Stay away. I'm begging you. After what she did to our family, seeing her will only bring pain. Please, Sarah. For me. Sarah deleted the email and slipped the phone back into her clutch. 22 years was long enough to run from the past. The ballroom of the Fairmont glittered with San Francisco's legal elite. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across 500 guests in black tie, their conversations a low hum of professional networking and champagne-fueled gossip. Sarah moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who belonged, her midnight blue gown simple but impeccable, her dark hair swept into a chignon that revealed the elegant line of her neck. She had learned years ago that true power whispered rather than shouted. Sarah Chen, oh my God, is that really you? The voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife. Sarah turned slowly, her face carefully neutral, and found herself staring at Amanda Richardson for the first time in over 2 decades. Amanda looked exactly as Sarah remembered. Blonde hair perfect, smile wide and bright, expensive jewelry catching the light. Except now there were fine lines around her eyes, and a hardness in her expression that hadn't been there at Harvard. I cannot believe you're here. Amanda rushed forward, hands outstretched, her voice pitched loud enough to turn heads. Everyone, you have to meet this woman. This is Sarah Chen. We went to Harvard Law together. She was absolutely brilliant, top of our class in constitutional law. Amanda grabbed Sarah's arm, squeezing with false intimacy. Where have you been hiding? I heard you went into public service. How noble. Are you still doing that? Or did you finally move into private practice where the real lawyers work? Sarah felt the familiar weight of a dozen pairs of eyes assessing her, measuring her against Amanda's designer original and the massive diamond on her left hand. She recognized several faces in the growing circle. Michael Torres from the DA's office. Jennifer Liu, who ran the city's largest criminal defense firm. David Wexler, a federal judge she'd argued before just last month. I'm still in public service, Sarah said quietly. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, pale and drawn, sitting across from her in that tiny apartment 12 years ago. Boxes everywhere. Eviction notice on the kitchen counter. Her mother's voice breaking as she explained how Amanda's father's law firm had buried them in legal fees over a property dispute they couldn't afford to fight. Oh, that's so sweet, Amanda cooed, her tone dripping with condescension. Public defenders do such important work. Someone has to represent those people, right? I mean, we can't all make partner at major firms. She laughed, a tinkling sound that made Sarah's teeth ache. But seriously, you should consider transitioning to corporate law. With your brain, you're wasting yourself on, what, petty criminals? Traffic violations? Actually, Sarah began, but Amanda was already turning to the man beside her, a silver-haired attorney Sarah recognized as Thomas Richardson, Amanda's father and managing partner at Richardson, Banks and Associates, one of the city's most prestigious firms. Daddy, this is Sarah Chen. We were at Harvard together. Remember I told you about the girl who got that fancy scholarship? Sarah, my father basically runs the legal community in San Francisco. Every major case goes through our firm eventually. Thomas Richardson extended a hand, his grip firm but his eyes dismissive, already looking past Sarah to someone more important across the room. Pleasure. Amanda speaks very highly of her Harvard connections, though I must say, I don't recall seeing your name on any significant cases. What firm are you with? I work for the federal government, Sarah replied evenly. Amanda's laugh was sharp. See, Daddy? Public service. I told you Sarah was always more interested in theory than practice. Some people just aren't cut out for the real pressure of private litigation. She turned back to Sarah, her smile patronizing. No judgment, of course. We need people in those positions. Someone has to fill out the paperwork, right? Sarah took a slow sip of her champagne, letting the moment breathe. Across the room, she caught sight of her colleague, Marcus Webb, Deputy Attorney General for the Northern District. He raised his glass slightly, one eyebrow lifted in a silent question. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. Not yet. The gala looks beautiful, Sarah said, changing the subject. You've done wonderful work with the venue. Oh, this old thing? Amanda gestured around the opulent ballroom with false modesty. It's nothing, really. When you're married to Christopher Aldridge, you learn how to throw these events. You know Christopher, right? Aldridge Pharmaceutical? His family has been in biotech for 3 generations. We're actually closing a major merger next week, $2.4 billion. It's been exhausting, all the legal work, but Daddy's firm is handling everything. Congratulations, Sarah murmured. You should see our house in Pacific Heights, Amanda continued, warming to her favorite subject. 6,000 square feet, original Victorian features. Christopher bought it outright. No mortgage. That's the kind of security you get when you marry well and work at a top firm. She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice still loud enough for the circle of listeners. Between you and me, Sarah, public service is fine when you're young and idealistic, but eventually, you have to think about your future. Retirement. Stability. You can't live on good intentions. Thomas Richardson chuckled, patting his daughter's shoulder. Amanda's right. The work you do is admirable, Miss Chen, but the real legal battles, the ones that shape policy and protect American business, those require resources and expertise you simply don't find in government offices. No offense, but public sector lawyers are typically there because they couldn't make it in competitive private practice. Sarah felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. She thought of her mother, now living comfortably in a small house Sarah had bought her in Sacramento, finally free of the crushing debt the Richardson firm had engineered. She thought of the years of careful, meticulous work, building cases brick by brick. She thought of the files currently sitting on her desk, 4 inches thick, cross-referenced and annotated. That's an interesting perspective, Sarah said softly. I suppose different people define success differently. Oh, don't be defensive. Amanda reached out to squeeze Sarah's hand, her grip just slightly too tight. We're all friends here. I'm actually trying to help you. If you ever want to make a real career move, I could probably get you an interview at our firm. Nothing senior, obviously. You'd have to start as a junior associate, but it would be a foot in the door. We have an opening and document review. It's mostly contract work, pretty routine, but it pays better than whatever you're making now. Document review. Sarah had prosecuted 3 federal judges, dismantled 2 corruption rings, and sent a sitting congressman to prison. But Amanda Richardson thought she was qualified for document review. The urge to laugh was almost overwhelming. That's very generous, Sarah managed, her voice steady despite the hot anger building in her throat. But I'm quite content where I am. Suit yourself. Amanda shrugged, already losing interest. Just seems like such a waste of a Harvard education, that's all. I mean, what do you even do all day? Push papers? Plead out small cases? Before Sarah could respond, a commotion near the ballroom entrance drew everyone's attention. A cluster of people had gathered, voices rising in excitement. Sarah recognized Senator Patricia Holloway making her entrance, flanked by security and staff. The senator was known for her anti-corruption platform and had personally requested updates on several of Sarah's ongoing investigations. Amanda immediately straightened, smoothing her dress. Oh, that's my cue. Senator Holloway specifically asked to meet me tonight. Daddy's firm donated heavily to her campaign. She flashed Sarah a brilliant smile. You understand? I'm sure. Duty calls. It was so lovely catching up. We should do coffee sometime. Really reconnect. I'd love to hear all about your little government job. Sarah watched Amanda glide away, her father in tow, both of them positioning themselves in the senator's path with the practiced ease of professional networkers. The circle around Sarah began to disperse, polite smiles masking the pity in their eyes. The brilliant Harvard graduate who'd settled for mediocrity. How sad. Michael Torres lingered, his expression troubled. Sarah, I had no idea you two knew each other. That was, intense. Ancient history, Sarah replied lightly. Law school friendships don't always survive the real world. Yeah, but she basically called you incompetent in front of half the legal community. Michael shook his head. Amanda Richardson has always been like that. Brilliant lawyer, no question. But she's got this need to make everyone else feel small. Her father's worse. The firm has a reputation for scorched earth tactics. Sarah said nothing, watching Amanda charm her way into the senator's inner circle across the room. She remembered her mother's voice on the phone, shaking with humiliation after the deposition where Thomas Richardson had torn apart her testimony about the property line dispute. Remembered the medical bills piling up because her mother's stress had triggered a heart condition. Remembered sitting in the gallery as a first-year law student, watching the Richardson firm steamroll her family's small-time attorney with motions and counter-motions until her mother simply couldn't afford to continue fighting. "Excuse me," she said to Michael. "I need some air." The terrace was blessedly empty, the cool San Francisco night air a relief after the hothouse atmosphere inside. Sarah gripped the railing, looking out over the city lights, and allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of pure, undiluted anger. Then she pulled out her phone. 3 missed calls from Marcus Webb. She dialed him back. "Where are you?" Marcus's voice was urgent. "I saw you talking to Amanda Richardson. Please tell me you didn't what? Reveal that I'm the lead prosecutor on the Richardson firm investigation? That I've spent 18 months building a federal corruption case against her father?" Sarah's laugh was brittle. "No, Marcus. I smiled and let her patronize me. I let her offer me a job in document review." Jesus Christ. Marcus exhaled slowly. "Sarah, the grand jury convenes in 4 days. In 4 days, we're handing up indictments against Thomas Richardson, 3 senior partners, and 12 associates at that firm for conspiracy, fraud, and corruption. The warrant for the firm's servers goes live at 6 a.m. Monday morning. This whole charade is about to come crashing down, and you just stood there and took her abuse? What was I supposed to do? Announce it in the middle of a charity gala?" Sarah closed her eyes. "Besides, Amanda's not named in the indictments. She's arrogant and cruel, but she's not criminal. Her father kept her isolated from the worst of it. That doesn't mean she gets to treat you like garbage." 4 days, Marcus. I can handle 4 days." Sarah opened her eyes, watching the city below. "Where are you?" "Inside, near the bar. Senator Holloway wants to talk to you, by the way. She just asked me if you were here." Sarah's pulse quickened. "Did you tell her?" "I said I'd find you." "Sarah, she knows about the case. She's been briefed by Maine Justice. She wants to personally thank you before the indictments drop." "Absolutely not. Not here. Not with the Richardsons watching." Sarah's mind raced. If the senator acknowledges me publicly, Amanda's going to wonder why. She's not stupid. She'll start asking questions. The senator's going to acknowledge you whether you like it or not. She's heading this way right now. Sarah turned to see Senator Holloway emerging onto the terrace, her details staying discreetly near the doors. The senator was in her 60s, gray hair in a sleek bob, her expression warm but her eyes sharp with intelligence. "Ms. Chen, I've been hoping to speak with you all evening." Senator Holloway extended her hand, her grip firm and dry. "Marcus Webb speaks very highly of your work." "Senator, it's an honor." Sarah shook her hand, hyper-aware of the security detail and the possibility of curious guests wandering onto the terrace. I wanted to personally thank you for your dedication to justice. The case you're building, it's exactly the kind of accountability we need in this city." The senator's voice dropped lower. "I know I'm not supposed to know the details, but I've been briefed at the highest levels. What you've uncovered, the scope of it, it's going to send shockwaves through the legal community. I'm just doing my job, Senator." "No, you're doing much more than that." Senator Holloway's expression turned serious. "You're dismantling a corrupt system that's been in place for decades. The Richardson firm has operated with impunity for too long, using their connections and resources to bury anyone who challenges them. What you've done takes courage." Sarah thought of her mother, of the countless other victims who'd been crushed under the Richardson firm's legal machine. They made it personal a long time ago. "I know about your mother's case." The senator's voice was gentle. "I know what they did to your family. That makes what you've accomplished even more remarkable. You could have walked away, avoided the conflict of interest questions, let someone else handle it. But you built an airtight case instead. The recusal hearing cleared me to proceed. My mother's case was civil. This is criminal. Different jurisdictions, different violations." Sarah had prepared that defense 1,000 times in her mind. And in 4 days, the whole world is going to know Sarah Chen's name. Senator Holloway smiled. "I hope you're ready for that." Movement behind the senator caught Sarah's attention. Amanda had emerged onto the terrace, her father beside her, both of them clearly intent on networking with the senator. Sarah's stomach tightened. "Senator, if you'll excuse me, I should—" "Senator Holloway," Amanda's voice rang out, bright and professional. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to introduce myself properly. Amanda Richardson, from Richardson, Banks and Associates. My father and I have been strong supporters of your anti-corruption platform." The senator's expression went carefully neutral. "Ms. Richardson, Mr. Richardson, thank you for your support." Thomas Richardson stepped forward, his smile practiced and confident. "Senator, we'd love to discuss your upcoming legislation on corporate accountability. Our firm has some expertise in that area we'd be happy to share. We've been working with several Fortune 500 companies on compliance issues." Sarah watched the senator's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. This was a disaster. If the senator said the wrong thing, revealed too much, the whole investigation could be compromised. "I appreciate the offer," Senator Holloway said carefully, "but my staff handles those discussions. If you'd like to submit a brief, you can send it to my office." Amanda's smile never wavered, but something flickered in her eyes. Confusion. She wasn't used to being dismissed. "Of course, Senator. We understand you're very busy. Actually, I was hoping you might have a moment to speak with some of our major clients. We represent Aldridge Pharmaceutical, among others. They have significant concerns about the proposed drug pricing legislation." "I'm sure they do." The senator's voice was cool. She glanced at Sarah, then back to the Richardsons. "If you'll excuse me, I was having a private conversation." Thomas Richardson's expression hardened. "Senator, with all due respect, I think you'll find that our firm has considerable influence in this city. We've helped elect 3 governors and 2 senators. It would be in everyone's best interest to maintain a positive working relationship." The air on the terrace seemed to crystallize. Sarah held her breath. That had been a threat, barely veiled, but unmistakable. Senator Holloway's eyes went cold. "Mr. Richardson, I don't respond well to threats, veiled or otherwise, and I choose my allies very carefully." The senator turned deliberately to Sarah. "Ms. Chen, perhaps we could continue our discussion inside." Amanda's gaze snapped to Sarah, really seeing her for the first time all evening. "Wait, why are you having a private discussion with Sarah? She's just a government lawyer. No offense, Sarah, but what could you possibly be consulting on that would interest a U.S. senator?" The senator's smile was sharp as glass. Ms. Chen is one of the most accomplished federal prosecutors in the country. She's argued before the Supreme Court. She's secured convictions in some of the most complex corruption cases this district has ever seen. And she's currently working on a matter of significant national importance. So to answer your question, Ms. Richardson, I consult with her because she's brilliant. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched the color drain from Amanda's face, watched understanding beginning to dawn in Thomas Richardson's eyes. He was quicker than his daughter, his decades of legal experience making connections Amanda couldn't see yet. Federal prosecutor? Amanda's voice was faint. You said you were in public service. I thought you meant, like, a public defender or something. You assumed, Sarah said quietly. I never corrected you. Thomas Richardson's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and went absolutely white. His hand shook slightly as he read whatever message had just come through. Sarah watched his eyes move across the text, watched the exact moment he understood. Amanda, he said hoarsely, we need to leave. Now. What? Daddy, we just got here. I haven't finished talking to the senator. Now, Amanda. Thomas grabbed his daughter's arm, his grip tight enough to make her wince. His eyes met Sarah's, and she saw fear there, raw and undisguised. Ms. Chen, I mean to say, have a good evening, Mr. Richardson. Sarah's voice was perfectly professional, perfectly calm. Inside, her heart was racing. She watched them retreat into the ballroom, Thomas Richardson practically dragging his daughter, his phone pressed to his ear. Senator Holloway let out a long breath. Well, that was unfortunate timing. I assume someone from his firm just tipped him off that we've been asking questions. Probably, Sarah agreed. Though it won't matter. We have everything we need. Bank records, email communications, testimony from 12 different witnesses. Even if they start destroying evidence tonight, we already have copies of everything. When does the warrant execute? Monday morning, 6 a.m. FBI will secure the premises, seize all computers and files. The indictments will be unsealed at noon. Sarah checked her watch. 58 hours from now, Richardson, Banks and Associates will cease to exist as a functioning law firm. Inside the ballroom, Sarah could see Amanda Richardson arguing with her father, her expression bewildered and angry. She saw Thomas Richardson making frantic phone calls, saw other senior partners from the firm beginning to gather, their faces tight with worry. The carefully orchestrated gala was fracturing, whispers spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Marcus Webb appeared at Sarah's elbow, his expression grim. It's starting. I've got 3 different partners trying to call their contacts at Main Justice. Someone's going to leak something to the press before morning. Let them try. Sarah felt strangely calm. The grand jury is already deliberating. The indictments are written. There's nothing they can do to stop it now. She walked back into the ballroom, Senator Holloway beside her. The crowd parted instinctively, conversations dying as they passed. Sarah felt the weight of hundreds of eyes, saw the speculation and confusion. Amanda Richardson stood near the bar, her face flushed, arguing with her father in a harsh whisper that carried across the sudden quiet. Don't understand what's happening. Why are we leaving? And what did that senator mean about Sarah being important? She's nobody, Daddy. She works for the government doing nothing cases. Shut up, Amanda. For once in your life, shut up. Thomas Richardson's voice cracked with stress. That woman is Sarah Chen, federal prosecutor, Northern District. She's been building a corruption case against our firm for 18 months. She has access to everything, Amanda. Every email, every bank record, every questionable billing entry we've ever made. Amanda's face went slack with shock. What? No, that's impossible. Sarah Chen she's just some public service lawyer. She was at Harvard with me. She couldn't. She graduated summa cum laude, Amanda. She clerked for Justice Morrison on the Supreme Court. She's prosecuted senators, judges, Fortune 500 CEOs, and you just spent 20 minutes telling her she was wasting her Harvard education on traffic violations. Sarah watched Amanda's expression cycle through disbelief, confusion, and finally, horrible understanding. She saw the moment Amanda remembered every condescending word, every dismissive smile, every casual insult. She saw Amanda's hand rise to her mouth, saw her physically take a step backward. "Oh God," Amanda whispered. "Oh my God, Daddy. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? She never said. She never corrected me. Because she didn't have to." Thomas Richardson was trembling now, his face mottled red and white. "Because she's a professional, Amanda. Because she's been doing her job while we've been busy underestimating her. Just like we underestimated her mother 12 years ago." Amanda's head snapped up. Her mother? What does her mother have to do with anything? The Chen property dispute, 2013. We buried them in motions and legal fees over a fence line disagreement worth maybe $20,000. We ran up $200,000 in costs and destroyed that woman's credit because our client wanted to prove a point. I destroyed Sarah Chen's mother for sport, Amanda. And now her daughter is about to destroy everything we've built. The words hung in the air between them. Around the ballroom, conversation had completely died. Everyone was watching the Richardsons' very public meltdown. Sarah stood perfectly still, letting them incriminate themselves with every panicked word. Jennifer Liu, the criminal defense attorney, materialized beside Sarah. "Is it true? Are you really prosecuting Richardson, Banks, and Associates?" "I can't comment on ongoing investigations," Sarah replied, her voice carrying in the sudden hush. "But you're not denying it." Jennifer's eyes were bright with professional interest. "Jesus Christ, Sarah. How long have you been working this?" 18 months, Marcus Webb answered for her, appearing on Sarah's other side. "And it's airtight. Multiple counts of fraud, corruption, witness tampering, and conspiracy. 23 defendants total. The largest legal corruption case in California history." The room exploded with noise. Lawyers pulling out phones, calling colleagues, spreading the news. The Richardsons stood frozen in the center of the chaos, their worst nightmare unfolding in real time at their own charity gala. Amanda pushed through the crowd toward Sarah, her earlier confidence completely shattered. "Sarah, please, we need to talk. What I said earlier, I didn't mean, I was just making conversation." "You meant every word," Sarah said calmly. "And that's fine, Amanda. You're entitled to your opinion of my career choices." "But I didn't know who you were. You should have told me." Amanda's voice rose, desperate and angry. "How was I supposed to know you were some important federal prosecutor? You let me think you were nobody." "I am nobody to you, Amanda. I have been since Harvard, when you decided I wasn't worth your time because I was on scholarship." Sarah's voice remained level, but something in her eyes made Amanda flinch. "The only difference now is that you need something from me, and that makes you pay attention. But I haven't changed. I'm exactly who I was when you were dismissing me 2 hours ago." Thomas Richardson stepped forward, his earlier arrogance completely gone. "Ms. Chen, please, can we speak privately? Perhaps we can reach some kind of understanding. Whatever you think you have on the firm, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Mr. Richardson, I think you should stop talking and call your attorney." Sarah glanced at her watch. "Actually, you should probably call several attorneys. You're going to need them." "You can't do this," Amanda's voice cracked. "My wedding is in 3 months. My husband's family, they're very prominent, very conservative. If Daddy's firm is indicted, if there's a scandal, then perhaps your father should have considered that before he spent decades running a criminal enterprise disguised as a law firm." Sarah's voice finally had an edge to it. Perhaps he should have thought about the consequences before he destroyed my mother's life over a property dispute worth less than his monthly car payment. Perhaps you both should have thought about a lot of things before tonight. Michael Torres was suddenly there, his hand on Sarah's arm. Sarah, maybe we should get you out of here. This is getting ugly. But Sarah stood her ground, watching as more Richardson firm partners gathered, their phones out, their faces pale with panic. She saw Christopher Aldridge, Amanda's fiancé, pushing through the crowd, his expression confused and alarmed. She saw the moment Amanda turned to him, saw her break down completely, sobbing against his chest while trying to explain what was happening. Senator Holloway's voice cut through the noise. Ladies and gentlemen, I think perhaps it's time to let the legal process unfold as it should. Ms. Chen has conducted herself with absolute professionalism and integrity throughout this investigation. I have full confidence that justice will be served. The senator's public endorsement was like a bomb detonating. It confirmed everything, made it official. The Richardson firm was finished. Sarah saw several guests already edging toward the exits, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. She saw business partners physically backing away from Thomas Richardson, saw the careful social network that had taken decades to build disintegrating in minutes. Christopher Aldridge had pulled away from Amanda, his expression hardening. Your father's firm is being indicted for corruption? Amanda, what the hell is going on? Our merger, the pharmaceutical deal. We've used your father's firm for all the legal work. It's fine. It'll be fine. Amanda was frantic now, mascara running down her face. Daddy, tell him it's fine. But Thomas Richardson couldn't even look at his daughter. He was on his phone, barking orders to someone, trying to coordinate a response that was far too late to matter. Sarah knew what he was doing. Calling emergency board meetings, trying to figure out which assets could be protected, which partners might turn state's evidence, calculating the damage. But it was all useless. The FBI had been monitoring the firm's communications for 6 months. Every call he made now was just more evidence. David Wexler, the federal judge, approached Sarah with something like awe in his expression. Sarah Chen, I should have realized. You argued that RICO case in my court last year, the one against the construction union. That was you building experience for this, wasn't it? That case was about justice for construction workers being extorted by their own union leadership, Sarah replied. But yes, it helped me understand the scope of what was possible when you follow the money. How much money are we talking about in the Richardson case? Sarah hesitated, then decided it would be public record in 58 hours anyway. North of $40 million in fraudulent billings and kickbacks. Another $20 million in assets we'll be able to seize under civil forfeiture. The judge whistled low. Jesus. And they had no idea you were coming for them? They knew someone was investigating. They didn't know it was me. Sarah watched Thomas Richardson across the room, saw him finally give up on his phone calls and sink into a chair, his head in his hands. They thought I was too insignificant to worry about. Just another government lawyer pushing papers. Amanda had broken away from Christopher and was pushing back through the crowd towards Sarah, her face red and blotchy from crying. You did this on purpose. You came here tonight knowing what was about to happen, and you let me humiliate myself. I came here tonight because I was invited to a legal professionals gala, Sarah said quietly. What you did to yourself, you did entirely on your own. You could have stopped me. You could have told me who you were. Amanda was screaming now, completely losing control. Instead, you just stood there smiling while I treated you like you always have, Sarah finished. Like you treated me at Harvard when you found out I was on scholarship? Like you treated my mother during that deposition? I didn't make you cruel, Amanda. You've always been this way. Tonight you just finally experienced consequences for it. Christopher Aldridge appeared behind Amanda, his jaw set. Amanda, we're leaving. Now. Chris, please, you have to understand. I understand that your father's law firm just blew up our merger. I understand that I'm going to have to explain to my board of directors why we trusted Richardson, Banks, and Associates with $2.4 billion in legal work when they were under federal investigation for corruption. His voice was ice cold. My family's reputation is about to be dragged through every newspaper in the country because of your father's crimes. But I didn't know. I'm not involved in any of this. Amanda was desperate now, clinging to his arm. It doesn't matter. You're a Richardson. That name is toxic now. He pulled away from her grip. I need to think. I need to talk to my attorneys. I need to figure out how to protect my company from this disaster. Sarah watched him walk away, watched Amanda collapse into a chair, her entire world crumbling around her. She felt Marcus's hand on her shoulder. We should go, he said softly. You've seen enough. But Sarah couldn't move. She stood in the center of the ruined gala, the beautiful ballroom that had been so perfect an hour ago now, looking like a disaster zone. Guests clustered in anxious groups, lawyers already trying to distance themselves from the Richardson firm, networking connections being severed in real time. The charitable cause the gala had been meant to support was completely forgotten in the scandal. Thomas Richardson finally stood, his movements those of an old man. He crossed the room toward Sarah, and the crowd parted to let him through. When he reached her, his face was gray, his eyes hollow. The Chen property case, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was really your mother? Margaret Chen. You deposed her for 6 hours. You questioned her mental competency, her financial records, her marriage, her parenting. You made her repeat her testimony 4 times until she had a panic attack on the stand. Sarah's voice was steady, but her eyes burned. She developed a heart condition from the stress. The medical bills almost bankrupted her a second time. I was just doing my job. The client wanted to win a $20,000 property dispute. You turned it into a $200,000 nightmare because you could. Because there's no penalty for over-litigating when you have infinite resources and your opponent has none. Sarah took a breath. You taught me something valuable, Mr. Richardson. You taught me that the law can be a weapon, but weapons work both ways. I have grandchildren, Thomas whispered. My daughter is getting married in 3 months. This will destroy everything. My mother lost her home. She lost her savings. She lost 2 years of her life to crushing depression and debt. But she survived. I imagine your family will too. Sarah picked up her clutch from the nearby table. Your attorneys will receive formal notification of the indictments on Monday morning. I'd suggest you use the weekend to prepare. It's going to be a very long trial. She walked toward the exit, Marcus and Senator Holloway flanking her. Behind them, the chaos continued to build. Sarah heard Amanda's voice, still crying, still trying to explain to anyone who would listen that she didn't know. She wasn't involved. It wasn't fair. Fair. Sarah almost laughed. Nothing about the legal system was fair. That was the first thing she'd learned watching her mother's case disintegrate under the Richardson firm's assault. But it could be just. With enough time, enough evidence, enough determination, it could eventually be just. The cool night air hit her face as they emerged from the hotel. Cameras flashed. The press had already gotten word somehow. Reporters shouting questions, lights blazing. Sarah kept her head down, let Marcus handle the no-comment responses, climbed into the waiting car. Only when they were pulling away from the curb did she finally let herself feel it. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a bone-deep exhaustion and the knowledge that the hardest part was still ahead. The trial would be brutal. The Richardson firm would hire the best defense attorneys money could buy. They would attack her credibility, her motives, her history. They would absolutely bring up her mother's case, claim bias, demand recusal. But she had the evidence. Bank records, emails, recorded phone calls, testimony from associates who'd been granted immunity in exchange for cooperation. She had built this case brick by careful brick, and it would stand. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "I saw the news. Are you okay?" Sarah smiled, typing back. "I'm okay, Mom. It's done. Finally done." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. "I'm proud of you. But please be careful. The Richardsons don't lose gracefully." Sarah looked out the window at the San Francisco lights blurring past. No, the Richardsons didn't lose gracefully. But that didn't matter anymore. Because in 56 hours, the full weight of the federal justice system was going to crash down on them, and all the grace in the world wouldn't save them from what was coming. She thought about Amanda's face, that final expression of complete incomprehension. Amanda had never understood that the world could tell her no, that consequences existed, that other people's pain mattered. Even now, even watching her father's empire collapse, Amanda was thinking about her wedding, her reputation, her inconvenience. But Sarah had learned young that the world said no constantly, that consequences were real and immediate, that pain mattered intensely. Those lessons had been expensive and brutal, taught in that small apartment with the eviction notice, in hospital waiting rooms while her mother recovered from stress-induced heart attacks, in sleepless nights working 3 jobs to get through law school. The car pulled up to her apartment building in the marina. Marcus walked her to the door, his expression concerned. "You going to be okay tonight? You don't have to be alone. We could get a drink, decompress." "I'm fine, Marcus. Really." Sarah managed a smile. "I just need to sleep. Monday's going to be the longest day of my life." She rode the elevator to her apartment, unlocked the door, and stood for a moment in the darkness before turning on the lights. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Breaking. Sources say major SF law firm. Faces federal indictment. The story was already spreading. Reporters piecing together fragments from panicked phone calls and overheard conversations at the gala. Sarah poured herself a glass of water and sat on her couch, still in her gown, watching her phone light up with notifications. Colleagues congratulating her. Former classmates asking if it was true. 3 missed calls from reporters who'd somehow gotten her number. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes. The next morning, Saturday, Sarah woke to her doorbell ringing insistently. She pulled on a robe and checked the peephole. A courier stood there with a massive envelope. She signed for it, already knowing what it would be. Inside were 3 separate letters from 3 different law firms, all requesting meetings, all hinting at settlement discussions, all dancing around the central question of whether their clients, various senior partners at Richardson, Banks, and Associates, might be interested in cooperation agreements in exchange for reduced charges. Sarah set them aside. It was too late for that. The time for cooperation had been 6 months ago, when she'd quietly reached out through back channels, offering deals to anyone willing to testify. Only 4 associates had taken that offer. The senior partners had laughed it off, confident that their connections and expensive lawyers would protect them. Her phone rang. Marcus. "Have you seen the news?" His voice was tight with stress. "Which news?" "All of it. Every major outlet has the story now. Thomas Richardson released a statement an hour ago calling the investigation a politically motivated witch hunt. He's hired Morrison and Chen as defense counsel." Sarah's stomach dropped. Morrison and Chen were the best criminal defense firm in the country. Former prosecutors who knew every trick, every loophole, every weakness in federal cases. He's fighting. Of course he's fighting. He's got everything to lose. Marcus paused. "Sarah, they're going to come after you hard. They're already spreading rumors that you have a personal vendetta because of your mother's case. They're going to file motions to disqualify you, claim bias, demand recusal. Let them try. The recusal hearing already cleared me. Judge Martinez ruled that a civil property dispute from over a decade ago doesn't create conflict in an unrelated criminal corruption case. Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. They can file all the motions they want. The evidence doesn't care about their defense strategy. Amanda Richardson gave an interview to Channel 7. It's going viral. Sarah pulled up the video on her laptop. Amanda sat in what looked like her living room, perfectly styled despite the tears streaming down her face. Her fiancé Christopher beside her, looking wooden and uncomfortable. "I've known Sarah Chen since Harvard," Amanda said, her voice breaking. "We were friends. I thought we were friends. And she came to that gala knowing what she was about to do to my family, and she said nothing. She let me talk, let me welcome her, and the whole time she was planning to destroy us. What kind of person does that?" The interviewer, a sympathetic blonde woman, leaned forward. "You had no idea about the investigation?" "None. I'm not involved in my father's firm beyond attending events. I'm getting married in 3 months. My whole life is falling apart because Sarah Chen decided to weaponize her position for some personal revenge over a case from years ago that had nothing to do with me." Sarah closed the laptop. So that was the narrative they were going with. The vindictive prosecutor with a personal grudge. It was predictable, and it wouldn't work legally, but in the court of public opinion, it might do damage. Sunday morning brought more news. Christopher Aldridge had officially postponed the wedding. His statement was brief and corporate. "Given recent developments, we believe it's prudent to delay our celebration until these matters are resolved." But the tabloids were less diplomatic. Pharma air dumps. Lawyer's daughter. After corruption scandal, screamed one headline. Sarah found herself feeling an unwelcome flicker of sympathy for Amanda. Whatever her faults, Amanda genuinely loved Christopher. And now she was watching everything she'd built, her engagement, her social standing, her father's legacy, crumble because of crimes she likely knew nothing about. But then Sarah remembered her mother's face during that deposition, remembered the medical bills, remembered being 22 years old and trying to figure out how to pay for her mother's emergency room visit while studying for finals. The sympathy evaporated. Sunday afternoon, her doorbell rang again. This time it was a process server. She'd been named as a defendant in a civil lawsuit filed by Richardson, Banks and Associates, alleging prosecutorial misconduct, selective prosecution, and violation of their civil rights. It was a nuisance suit, designed to harass and distract her. It would be dismissed eventually, but it would take time and energy she didn't have to spare. Sarah called Marcus. "They filed a civil suit against me personally." "I know. They filed one against the entire prosecution team, the FBI agents involved, and the Justice Department. It's a Hail Mary. Judge Martinez is going to laugh it out of court." Marcus sighed. "But it's going to be ugly, Sarah. They're fighting for their lives. Thomas Richardson is looking at 20 years minimum if convicted. The other partners are facing similar sentences. They're going to throw everything they have at us." "Good," Sarah said quietly. "Let them fight. Let them file every motion, make every argument, attack every witness. Because when they lose anyway, when the jury comes back with guilty verdicts despite their $1 million defense team, it'll mean something. It'll mean the system actually worked." Monday morning arrived like a storm. Sarah was at the office by 5 a.m., watching the final preparations. FBI teams were assembled, warrants were reviewed one last time, and the plan was confirmed. At exactly 6 a.m., federal agents would enter Richardson, Banks and Associates offices, serve the warrant, and begin the seizure of evidence. Sarah stood in the operations center, watching multiple screens showing different camera angles as the teams moved into position. She saw Thomas Richardson arrive at his office early, saw his expression change when he spotted the FBI vehicles, saw him try to turn around, try to leave, before agents intercepted him. The warrant execution was textbook perfect. Computers were imaged, files were boxed, phones were confiscated. Employees arrive for work to find federal agents controlling access to the building. Several senior partners who'd been named in the indictments were arrested on the spot, led out in handcuffs in front of gathering news cameras. By 8 a.m., every news station in the country was running the footage. Thomas Richardson in handcuffs, his face gray, his expensive suit rumpled. Amanda Richardson arriving at the scene, screaming at the agents, being physically restrained by Christopher Aldridge, who'd apparently accompanied her. The complete collapse of one of San Francisco's most prestigious law firms happening in real time. At noon, the indictments were formally unsealed. Sarah stood at a podium in the federal building's press room, flanked by Marcus Webb, the FBI special agent in charge, and representatives from Maine Justice. Camera flashes created a strobe effect as she read from her prepared statement. Today, a federal grand jury has returned indictments against 23 individuals associated with the law firm of Richardson, Banks, and Associates. The charges include conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, witness tampering, and corruption. Over a period of 15 years, the defendants engaged in a systematic scheme to defraud clients, manipulate billing records, and accept kickbacks from vendors and expert witnesses. The total amount of fraudulent activity exceeds $40 million. Sarah paused, letting that number sink in. $40 million stolen from clients who trusted Richardson's firm to represent their interests. This investigation represents 18 months of intensive work by dedicated federal agents, prosecutors, and support staff. We have reviewed over 2 million pages of documents, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and traced financial transactions through multiple jurisdictions. The evidence is overwhelming and irrefutable. A reporter shouted a question. Ms. Chen, is it true you have a personal connection to the Richardson firm through your mother's case? Sarah had prepared for this. My mother was involved in a civil property dispute that was handled by Richardson, Banks, and Associates over a decade ago. That matter was thoroughly reviewed by the recusal hearing, and Judge Martinez ruled that it creates no conflict with this criminal prosecution, which involves entirely different conduct, different time periods, and different legal violations. The evidence in this case was gathered independently and speaks for itself. What about Amanda Richardson's claims that this is a vendetta? Ms. Amanda Richardson is not named in any of the indictments. She is not a target of this investigation. Her father and his associates are being prosecuted because they committed crimes, not because of any personal animosity. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. The questions continued for 20 minutes. Sarah answered each one calmly, professionally, never showing emotion. When it was over, she walked back to her office and closed the door. Her phone showed 47 missed calls. She ignored all of them except one. Her mother. Did you watch? Sarah asked. Every second. Her mother's voice was thick with tears. Baby, I'm so proud of you. But I'm also terrified. These people are dangerous. They're going to come after you with everything they have. I know, Mom. But we've got them. The evidence is solid. They're going to prison. And Amanda? I saw her on the news. She looked destroyed. Sarah closed her eyes. Amanda made her choices. She chose to be cruel. She chose to look down on people she considered beneath her. She's not going to prison, but she's learning that actions have consequences, even if they take years to arrive. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment watching the coverage. Every network had legal analysts breaking down the indictments, discussing the evidence, speculating about trial strategy. Some praised the prosecution's thoroughness. Others questioned whether the case was overcharged, whether personal bias might have influenced charging decisions. One analyst, a defense attorney Sarah recognized, was particularly harsh. This reeks of prosecutorial overreach. Sarah Chen built her entire case around billing disputes and accounting irregularities that could easily be explained as mistakes rather than crimes. She's destroying lives and careers over what amounts to aggressive lawyering. Sarah turned off the TV. Let them spin it however they wanted. The jury would see the emails where partners discussed inflating hours, the bank records showing kickbacks from expert witnesses, the testimony from associates who'd been ordered to fabricate billing entries. No amount of media spin could change those facts. The trial began 4 months later. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters every morning. Sarah arrived early each day, walking past the cameras without comment, while defense attorneys held impromptu press conferences attacking the prosecution's case. Inside the courtroom, the battle was methodical and brutal. Morrison, the lead defense attorney, was everything Sarah had expected. Brilliant, aggressive, relentless. He attacked every witness, challenged every piece of evidence, filed motions on every possible ground. But Sarah had prepared for this. She'd anticipated every argument, documented every transaction, corroborated every claim. When Morrison tried to dismiss the billing fraud as mere mistakes, she produced emails showing deliberate inflation. When he claimed the kickbacks were legitimate consulting fees, she traced the money through shell corporations back to the partners' personal accounts. Amanda attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row behind her father, her face pale and drawn. Christopher Aldridge was noticeably absent. The engagement had been officially called off 2 weeks into jury selection. On day 37 of the trial, Sarah called her key witness, Robert Martinez, a former senior associate who'd been granted immunity. He took the stand, looking terrified but determined. Mr. Martinez, can you describe the billing practices at Richardson, Banks and Associates? We were required to hit minimum billable hours each month, 2,200 hours annually. If we didn't meet those numbers, we were put on probation. Martinez's voice shook slightly, but the work didn't always exist to support those hours. So we were told to enhance our time entries. Enhance? Can you be more specific? Inflate them. A 30-minute phone call became an hour. A 2-hour research session became 4 hours. We were taught how to make it look legitimate, how to spread the fake hours across multiple matters so it wouldn't be obvious. Who taught you this? Martinez looked directly at Thomas Richardson. The partners. Mr. Richardson himself conducted training sessions for new associates. He called it maximizing value capture from client relationships. The courtroom erupted. Judge Martinez gavelled for order. Sarah saw Thomas Richardson lean over to whisper urgently to his attorney, saw Amanda cover her face with her hands. The testimony continued for 3 days. Martinez described the quota system, the pressure to bill impossibly high hours, the explicit instructions to fabricate time entries. He produced notebooks where he documented every instance, every instruction, every fraudulent bill. Morrison tried to destroy him on cross-examination. Mr. Martinez, isn't it true you were fired from Richardson, Banks and Associates for poor performance? I was fired because I questioned the billing practices. You were fired because you couldn't meet your targets, and now you're trying to blame your failure on my clients. I was fired because I told Mr. Richardson I wouldn't participate in fraud anymore. Martinez's voice grew stronger, and I have the documentation to prove it. I kept copies of everything. When the prosecution rested after 6 weeks of testimony, Sarah felt cautiously confident. The evidence was overwhelming. 23 defendants, hundreds of fraudulent bills, millions of dollars in kickbacks and inflated charges. The defense had fought hard, but they couldn't overcome the sheer weight of documentation. Morrison's closing argument was masterful. He painted the prosecutors as vindictive government bureaucrats, targeting successful lawyers out of jealousy and spite. He portrayed the billing practices as industry standard. He claimed the kickbacks were legitimate business arrangements. He made Sarah out to be a zealot with a personal vendetta. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Chen wants you to believe that these respected attorneys, pillars of the San Francisco legal community, spent 15 years running a criminal enterprise. But what she's really shown you is that law firms operate like businesses, and businesses make judgment calls about billing and expenses. Are those always perfect? No. But imperfection isn't fraud. Aggressive billing isn't a crime. What we have here is a prosecutor who couldn't succeed in private practice taking revenge on those who did. Sarah's closing was simpler. She walked the jury through the evidence, piece by piece, showing the deliberate pattern of fraud. She displayed emails where partners joked about creative billing. She showed bank records where kickbacks were disguised as consulting fees. She let the defendants' own words condemn them. The defense wants you to believe this is about aggressive billing. It's not. It's about theft. These attorneys stole from their clients. They fabricated hours. They accepted bribes. They manipulated the legal system for personal profit. And when they got caught, they tried to claim it was all just business as usual. Sarah paused, looking each juror in the eye. But you know better. You've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You know the difference between aggressive business practices and criminal fraud. And you know what the verdict needs to be. The jury deliberated for 11 days. Sarah barely slept, running through the evidence again and again in her mind, wondering if she'd missed something, if Morrison had found a crack in her case. On day 11, her phone rang. The jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Sarah sat at the prosecution table, her hands folded calmly despite the racing of her heart. Across the aisle, the 23 defendants sat in rows, some looking defiant, some terrified. Thomas Richardson stone-faced and blank. Amanda was in her usual seat, gripping the railing in front of her so hard her knuckles were white. For the first time in months, Sarah looked directly at her. Amanda's eyes were hollow, her face gaunt. She'd lost weight, lost her glow, lost everything that had made her seem so confident and perfect at the gala. The jury filed in. None of them looked at the defendants. Sarah's heart leaped. That was a good sign. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Martinez asked. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, how do you find the defendant Thomas Richardson?" "Guilty." The courtroom exploded. Guilty on conspiracy. Guilty on wire fraud, 17 counts. Guilty on money laundering, 8 counts. Guilty on witness tampering. Guilty, guilty, guilty. One by one, the verdicts were read. 23 defendants. Over 200 individual counts. Guilty on nearly every charge. Sarah sat perfectly still, listening to Amanda Richardson's sobs echoing through the courtroom. She watched Thomas Richardson's face remain frozen, watched the other partners break down, watched federal marshals move into position to take them into custody. Judge Martinez set sentencing for 6 weeks later. Thomas Richardson was remanded immediately, his bail revoked based on flight risk. The other partners were fitted with ankle monitors, their passports surrendered. Sarah walked out of the courtroom into a wall of cameras and shouted questions. She gave a brief statement thanking the jury, the FBI, and her team. Then she went back to her office, closed the door, and finally allowed herself to feel it. She'd won. After 18 months of investigation, 4 months of trial, 11 days of deliberation, she'd won. Her mother called, crying too hard to speak. Sarah just held the phone, listening to her sob, letting her release 12 years of pain and humiliation. 6 weeks later, sentencing day arrived. Thomas Richardson received 22 years in federal prison. The other senior partners received sentences ranging from 8 to 18 years. The junior associates who'd cooperated received probation. Amanda Richardson gave a victim impact statement, pleading for mercy for her father. "He's not a criminal. He's a lawyer who made mistakes. He has grandchildren who need him. Please, Your Honor, he doesn't deserve this." Judge Martinez listened patiently, then delivered his ruling. Mr. Richardson, you violated the trust of your clients, you corrupted the legal profession, and you showed no remorse until you were caught. 22 years is appropriate for the scope and duration of your crimes. Sarah watched the marshals lead Thomas Richardson away in shackles, watched Amanda collapse in the gallery, watched the defense attorneys pack their briefcases, their million-dollar effort ending in complete defeat. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if she felt vindicated. Sarah thought about the question carefully. This case was never about vindication. It was about accountability. These defendants spent 15 years stealing from clients and corrupting the legal system. Today, justice was served. That's all that matters. But as she walked back to her office, Sarah allowed herself a small, private moment of satisfaction. She thought about that gala, about Amanda's condescending smile, about being offered a job in document review. She thought about all the people who'd underestimated her, dismissed her, assumed she wasn't important because she'd chosen public service over private wealth. And she thought about her mother, who'd called that morning to say she was finally sleeping through the night without nightmares about debt collectors and legal threats. The case was over. The Richardson firm had declared bankruptcy, its assets seized to pay restitution to defrauded clients. Amanda Richardson had moved to Portland, trying to rebuild her life far from the scandal. Christopher Aldridge had married someone else. Sarah's phone buzzed with a news alert. Former federal prosecutor Sarah Chen, named to President's task force on legal ethics reform. She smiled. There was always more work to do. But tonight she would go home, pour herself a glass of wine, and allow herself to remember that moment at the gala, when Amanda had looked at her with such pity, such condescension, such absolute certainty that Sarah had wasted her potential. Some lessons took time to teach, but they were worth the wait.